Hello, my friend. Welcome back. I want to leave this conversation by first asking a couple questions that I think everyone can relate to. I think the topic forgiveness can be a bit heavy for someone who is in the process of healing or hasn't really healed. So I want to be mindful if you're listening to today's episode, you may be looking for maybe some solace to feel validated or feel like you are not alone or you're not the only one going through a healing process. And I'm here to tell you that you don't have to face it alone. So here are some questions that I think we can kind of relate to. And the first one is there someone you have a hard time being next to because the thought of the pain they cause is too great? Or do you ever find yourself lost in your thoughts of thinking what they should have said to you so that you can have closure? Or even maybe you feel validated that you want to feel validated that someone did hurt you. So if you answered yes to any of these questions, then you are meant to be here listening to this episode today. And this is Cancer at 34, where I bring awareness of facing cancer at a young age and finding hope in the midst of it. And so I wanted to share some hope with you today that even if you may not be going through cancer like I went through, we do share a similarity, which is called life. And we all struggle with all these things like forgiveness and letting go of emotions, situations, or past traumas that we carry with us. And I'm not here to kind of give you like a big spiel about my trauma or past hurts, but instead, I do want to open a conversation with you of how to open your heart to forgiveness and letting go, you know, because those are keys to healing and making room for growth. So I want you to really sit with this. Ask yourself this, and I want you to really just sit with it. And it's these questions of what makes it easier for you to be able to forgive someone, and what makes it harder for you to forgive someone. So now, if I sit and ask myself these questions, I would answer for me, it would make it easier for me to forgive if that person that did me wrong would actually admit their fault and apologize, or even feel validated that what was done to me was wrong. So, what makes it hard for me to forgive would be never getting an apology or seeing that that person continues to hurt people and there's no stopping it. Now, how does science see forgiveness? So, a research study found that forgiveness actually influences your psychological health by affecting your levels of anger and also hope. So, when people practice forgiveness, this actually reduces their levels of anger and increases their levels of hope. So imagine you have all this anger, all this sadness or resentment building up for what happened to you or what someone did to you years ago. How do you think your body will allow room for hope of the future, hope for better things in your life, and even room to heal? So all this accumulation of that anger leads us to seek answers or even interpretations to why we think those bad things happen to us. And psychologically, there are different forms of forgiveness that help with healing, and those are forgiving ourselves for the decisions that we made when we didn't know what we know today, or for our coping mechanisms that we use because they helped us survive. We have to forgive ourselves even for those. A second one also is forgiving other people, which is, I think, harder, especially if you have that person in your life still and they continue to trigger you. And a third one found is that forgiving a situation for example, a natural disaster, a cancer diagnosis, a miscarriage, these form of forgiveness is harder to come by because there isn't really like a person that we can blame or be angry at for that fact. So the problem that we create is our mindset behind forgiveness because we believe that we have reached forgiveness when we no longer feel that pain or anything. We don't even think about it. That's when we think we have healed. And I want to share something that I found really fascinating that I heard from a therapist, and she's also a minister. Her name is Dr. Anita Phillips. She has really devoted her career to intertwining healing from a psychological perspective and also a spiritual perspective. So she combines those two together to bring her messages, and her message actually focused on having hope because of the wildfires that have been happening. She wanted to give hope, but the Holy Spirit kind of drove her to talk more about forgiveness in a form of hope. So she actually referenced the word forgive in Greek, which means let go, to release, to pardon, or even cancel a debt. And in the Bible, the word forgive also shows up as the word left. And in the story of Jesus, he shows up to the sea where Peter, Simon, and Andrew were fishing. He shows up to their boat and Jesus asked them to follow him. So all three men left their nets to follow him. And you may ask, like, what does this story have anything to do with forgiveness? Well, these three men left their nets. It means that they forgave and they released what they were carrying, past traumas, past hurts, past feelings that they had. They let them go, they forgave, and they decided to follow Jesus. So, from this story, I think we can use it as an example that it is really about changing our mind, and shifting our mindset of our life, of our livelihood and our identity. We can use as an example of what they did to how we can kind of transfer that over to our time of changing our livelihood, changing our identity, changing our mindsets. And so Dr. Anita goes even further, and she goes to describe the correlation of the nets and how it relates to our physiology based on an anatomy class that she took. And she mentions that early anatomists named our internal body parts based on what they look like. So we have an organ that actually looks like a net that is called the reticular formation. And this body part can be found in a special area of our brainstem that helps control alertness, attention, movement, and emotions. So the word reticular was actually chosen by them because it stems from a Latin word that means net. And this organ is made up of very tiny nerve fibers that spread through our brain, and it's like a fishing net. And it helps us to store information coming from the body, and then it filters that message as an important one or an unimportant information because it helps us to focus and helps with regulating our emotions. So imagine if this organ gets overactive. It will begin to intensify our pain, whether it is physical or emotional, because our brain doesn't know the difference if it's an emotional or physical pain. So now imagine that you have all this like emotional abuse that isn't healed or emotional pain because of what someone did to you up inside. Then your body now remains injured and overly sensitive to pain and stuck in that fear. And I know it's not easy to feel like this pain will never leave you, but I do think that if we remain stuck in this fear or anger because of we want to analyze the problem and figure it out or even find answers to our questions, we just continue to fish for answers in our head. And I can say for myself that it gets hard to continue to carry these nets of pain, resentment, and anger. Even if you don't think about it daily, it tends to creep up on you. And it can even happen when you are perhaps sitting alone and you're wondering why this past keeps coming up when you're really trying hard to forget. And your brain cannot forget pain, but it can definitely repurpose that energy when you work through it with healing, like therapy, prayer, meditation, and definitely let that go. So I would like to be vulnerable here with you because this year, 2025, really allowed me to listen to my body. And forgiveness, I feel, was clearly standing out for me because it was sticking out like a sore thumb in my body. And my body and my mind continued to tell me, it's time to let go. It's time to move on. And the weight of the past is not worth carrying with me in this new version of myself. So I want to encourage you as well, like in this new version of yourself, you can't carry this past with you. So the weight of the past is not worth carrying with you. And if I wanted to succeed at getting better physically, emotionally, and spiritually, I knew that I needed to change my way of living, my habits, and my mindset. And I think it's important for us to understand, to let go and follow our truth. And I feel like you don't have to be a believer, but the idea that I am sharing with you today is to be open to love, to change, to really embracing that new version of yourself where your health and your well being outshines this pain, where you become a priority and that pain no longer has a place to be in your head and your heart and your mind. And I want to leave you with this final thought from Catherine Ponder that says, when you hold resentment toward another, you are bound to that person or conditioned by an emotional link that is stronger than steel. Forgiveness is the only way to dissolve that link and get free. You are meant to be loved and you are meant to be free. And remember, from one thriver to another, keep thriving.